Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Okay, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Teaching Through a Pandemic, Our Virtual Education System Today and Beyond, brought to you by the Department of Alumni Engagement, Philanthropy, and the College of Education and Human Services. My name is Tim Purnell, and I will be moderating today's session. This panel is brought to you in part by the inaugural Educator Appreciation Week, and a thank you and a recognition of all of our educators for all of their hard work through the pandemic, transitioning their once classrooms or offices into a virtual experience. Our schools have pivoted quickly through this time of radical adaptability. And while the world faced tremendous uncertainty, our educators rose to the challenge, shifting to remote learning, all the while facing the same concerns that all of us faced: losing loved ones, job loss, and assisting their own children in a learning environment. So we look forward to sharing with you in the next hour and discussing some of our experiences. So before we get started, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. We are taking questions live, and we encourage your participation. If you have a question, type the question into the question box on your screen. And please feel free to ask any question that comes up at any time. We're going to do our best to answer all of the questions. If you need assistance, if you're experiencing any technical difficulty, please type in at the chat feature if you're having trouble, and one of our university employees will reach out through the private chat and try to assist you. Again, my name is Tim Purnell. I'm a former educator, former 9-year superintendent and adjunct professor, and I currently serve as the CEO of Next for Autism. But more importantly, or most importantly, I am a pirate. I'm a former alumni of Seton Hall University. I'd like to now introduce our panel members who are going to be joining you, and you'll be able to see their faces, which is a much better picture than what you have now. And I'm going to go off camera so we can bring them on. So panel members, if you can make your cameras active, and we'll start with the introductions. All right, I promise you, that's a much better image right there, right? So I'd like to introduce our panel members. Panel members, just make sure you're unmuted for this portion and the remainder of the session. I'd like to begin by, let's start with Dr. Baker. If you can introduce yourself and we'll move forward.
Hi, everybody. I am Christine Baker. And as you know, I graduated. I earned my PhD in child clinical psychology from Seton Hall University in 1990. I'm currently the clinical director at the Metropolitan Regional Diagnostic and Treatment Center. That's at Newark Beth Israel Medical Center in Newark. And I also, which you may not know, earned my master's degree from Seton Hall University. To go Pirates. And I earned that in school and community psychology. And that program at Seton Hall allowed me to become certified as a school psychologist. So I've worked in a variety of capacities throughout my career. And that includes being a school psychologist, a private practitioner, a teacher, an expert witness for child maltreatment cases, consultant, a lot of things. But what's as important is that I started my career as an elementary school teacher. I first taught out of college, 3rd grade, and so I'm very, very happy to be here today amongst educators. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Next, Dr. Tomy Parlopinites.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trindopoulos Parlopinites, Tommy for short. I am superintendent of Central Regional School District. I might be the dumbest kid never to have graduated. I was a student here, a teacher here, a principal here, and now superintendent. So this is my 30th year here at Central. It's crazy, my 13th year as superintendent. And I have over 21 years in administration, and so I've seen it all, and very excited. I hope everybody's safe and stays well out there, and hopefully we'll answer any of your questions today. Thank you for having me on here. I'm also graduate of Seton Hall, got my doctorate here, so go Pirates.
Thank you, Tommy. And next, Dr. Gerald Fits.
Good afternoon, panelists. Good afternoon, community of listeners here online this afternoon. I'm the proud superintendent of schools in Orange Township. In just under 1.5 hours, we're doing our caravan drive-by parade for our seniors. So I was down at the Orange Preparatory Academy, making sure that was straight, ready to go for our seniors. And I'm back up in the Central Administration Office to do this panel. I just want to just intimate that this is my 21st year in public education. I taught grades 1, 4, and 5 in the North Public Schools. I was a vice principal in the North Public Schools as well as a principal. After serving 13 years in that district, I went to the Hoboken Public Schools where I served for 6 years, 4 years as a principal and 2 years as the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. In 2018, I returned to the North Public Schools to be the deputy superintendent of schools, and I also served as the curriculum director in the North Public Schools until I finished my doctorate in February 2019 from Seton Hall University, so another pirate here. And I then applied to become superintendent in the city of Orange, and that's where I currently work, live, breathe, and do some great critical work. So welcome, everyone. And again, I look forward to sharing some of the nuances during this pandemic time that I brought forth in Orange Township.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzhugh. And next we have Julia Lanuez, one of our teachers.
Good afternoon. I'm Julia Lanuez. I am a speech pathologist at Rutgers Day School, a school for students with psychiatric impairments and learning disabilities. I graduated from Seton Hall in 2017 with my bachelor's of education, and then again in 2019 with my master's in speech pathology. So I just recently finished my clinical fellowship, so I am on the newer end of my education career.
Thank you, Julia. And next we have Carly Sternowski.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like he said, I'm Carly Sternowski. I teach 3rd grade at Monmouth Junction Elementary School in South Brunswick. I just graduated last May from Seton Hall, so definitely go Pirates. So it's my first year of teaching, which is definitely a memorable way to spend your first year, but grateful nonetheless.
Indeed. So as you can see, everyone, we have quite an impressive lineup, and might I add, they are all Pirates. So thank you, panelists. We appreciate you being here today, especially during this time. So let's get started with some of the questions. And again, reminder for attendees, please jot in your question. If you have any questions, write into the question box, and we'll get to those in a few moments. But let's begin with a question for Dr. Baker or either one of our teachers on the panel. What has been the biggest challenge that you've experienced during the pandemic, and how did you overcome it? Dr. Baker, you want to start? Yeah.
Sorry, I just unmuted myself. Yes, so the biggest challenge for me was the transition. Part of being the clinical director, Metro Regional Diagnostic Center is at a hospital, and we provide services for child maltreatment in its various forms. So we do evaluations, forensic evaluations for our families, for the courts. We also provide trauma-focused therapy, and we, throughout that whole timeline of services, what we do is provide in-person services. So the biggest transition was to change from in-person treatment for a variety of patients receiving services, and a variety of courts and Division of Child Protection and Permanency, some people still know it as DIVIS, is that we had to be able to continue to provide services for the division and for our families without being able to see them. So our transition to telehealth services required that we be trained We had to develop guidelines. We had to use existing guidelines through the American Psychological Association and through APSAC, which is the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children. And all of that happened in the process of not being able to have the equipment. A lot of our families didn't have tablets. A lot of our families didn't have Wi-Fi. So we had to develop informed consents that we could have developed verbally through telehealth services. So all of that went on. We lost a lot of our full-time clinicians who needed to do family leave for their children who were out of school, as we have teachers here. So all of that happened. Some of our people were concerned about their health. So we came in every day to develop services, and I'm pleased to say that we currently have active 60 child and adolescent patients who we provide through telehealth services. But in the process of going through all that, I lost my own father April 9th to COVID-19. He was in a nursing home. We are very fortunate that he didn't have the nightmares that you see on the screen that you've seen. He had an acute illness. He'd only been in a nursing home for 2 years. And we loved the staff there. They never made headlines, thank goodness. But in the process of all that and helping people recover and institute, adapt, I had to grieve the loss of my own father, and we had other people at my center who had losses as well. So it's very difficult because we had to carry on. When everyone was sheltering in place, we had to continue to come for services. So I took bereavement and I came back to work to ensure that as teachers, we continue to teach when things like that happen. And we had a responsibility to our patients and our doctoral level psychology externs as well, who we had to manage. So it's a very trying time, but we triumph because we learned what we needed to do. We trained, we took care of ourselves as best we could. We've all gained about 5 pounds because we have self-care Thursdays, and it's terrible. We just eat too much, but we're here taking care of each other. But it continues to be quite a trying time. Thank you.
Dr. Baker, we're so sorry for your loss. Prayers and thoughts to your family. And it's amazing, though, you came back for the children, especially those children that need it the most, those who are abused or neglected. Thank you for your services. Any, either one of our teachers, Julia, Carly, do you want to try answering that question? Okay, Carly, all right.
Sure. So one of the biggest challenges in terms of like my general education class would be kind of establishing a new sense of normalcy, because while our worlds were flipped upside down, so were theirs. And especially I have third grade, which they are pretty tech savvy, especially some of them, but others may not be so familiar with logging on to a Hangout, how to turn on a camera, how to turn on a microphone. So I solved it kind of by treating it like the first couple weeks of school, when they have to get used to you and the routines and the expectations. So now kind of creating an online classroom. So really kind of taking a step back and not thinking that you can just continue on like, oh, well, we left off with multiplication, we're gonna pick it back up. You kind of had to start from a ground level and establish a new foundation and go from there. So establishing tech rules, like your camera has to stay on. If you're not speaking, try and mute your microphone. If you do have something to say, you still have to raise your hand. So kind of establishing those new expectations so that they feel secure in their new environment, and then you can start going into the academics of it. And also kind of once you have that routine, you're able to incorporate those times for building classroom community, because that's still, even though we're not in the classroom together physically, having that connection, that social emotional learning is so critical for them, especially now because they're not getting the typical exposure that they would. So having all of this so that you do have that organization and time where they can just share what they did yesterday or something exciting that they learned. So kind of finding that balance, but really realizing that it's new for us and it's also new for them. So you kind of have to start not all the way over, but create a new environment for them.
Yeah, Carl, it's amazing. You know, you're thinking of the world turning upside down for those children and the trauma and the mental health, and the fact that you had that opportunity for your kids to be able to get that off their mind. That's an amazing impact to learning. I'm sure you saw it directly to the learning environment. Julia, do you want to try to answer that question?
Sure, thank you. So for me, my biggest challenge was figuring out how I was going to implement their IEP to the best of my ability in this new scenario where, again, like both Dr. Baker and Carly kind of stated, they might not have the access to those kind of tools, those technology tools, or they also might have family members who are trying to work. They might not be able to assist them in getting on, and kind of having them have accountability for their own goals, because in school we have, you know, so many things set up to keep them accountable, whether it be a point system or a sticker chart, or knowing that they're even earning your praise. Oh, good job with that. Their classmates seeing that they're doing a good job. Now that they're a little bit more isolated, they truly had to become accountable for themselves. And for many students, they're not used to having to have that own personal accountability. They're used to adults around them keeping them accountable. So the way I kind of solved it in my position is I took their goals and I looked at them at a very fundamental level, and I looked to see what are the skills I absolutely want this student to master and what is most functional in their current home environment. Because unfortunately, we don't know when we're going to be physically back in school. So I wanted to make sure their goals were as functional and as generalizable as possible while they're in the school, in the home setting. So I tried to link it to activities of daily living and tried to link it to the things they were doing at home. What's their favorite video game? And I would incorporate that into our reading lesson. Or what TV show do I know that their brother is watching in the other room because I can hear it very loudly? And how can we kind of discuss that in our social scenario and make it very real life for the short amount of time I got to spend with them? So it wasn't perfect, but it definitely, I think, made more of an impact than if I, like Carly said, tried to just pick up where we left off in March.
Not easy task to do for children who need those, you know, who have an individualized education program and really need that support. And it's nice hearing how you pivoted and you connected to them personally. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for those answers. Let's go with another question. And let's direct this one to the superintendents. I think the world is wondering, you know, what are schools going to look like in the fall? What's it going to look like in the future? You know, looking ahead, in your opinion, you know, do you feel after going through all this, after going through the pandemic, how is this going to shape, you know, your plans, or how will this impact your district in the future? Tommy, you want to try that one first?
All right. Dr. Fitz, you want to go first or second? Doesn't matter.
I defer to the CEHS.
Okay, sure. It's you know, I personally need to get back. Like I said, I've never worked so hard and gone nowhere. And I think the kids, the teachers, everybody are ready. I think we're going to see a combination of virtual learning in the fall with kids coming in. So like we're going to divide our high school. The juniors and seniors are going to come in one day. The freshman, sophomore will have virtual learning. The next day, freshmen, sophomores come in. The junior, seniors have virtual learning. That way we can provide social distancing on the buses, in the hallways, in the classrooms, everywhere else. You know, we're actually going to have people riding our buses. So when our first order of thermometers came in, we're at 130 thermometers. So we're going to have somebody riding the bus, get off at the bus stop, take the temperature of the students at the bus stop, and then allow them to either get on the bus or send them home, because we don't want to bring somebody that might be infected, and then we have to trace them throughout the entire building. We have about 1,550 students, so we want to make sure that we open up, we have sanitation, you know, disinfectant. We just bought UV machines that go into each room and sanitizes the whole room in about 10 minutes. We also are putting UV lights, 3 UV lights in each classroom. So that'll be great until the student that finds out about it is there with the big, you know, getting a tan while they're in class, you know, once they find out the UV lights are located in the classroom. But we're going to try to make it as safe as we possibly can, first and foremost, for our students and our teachers. You know, I think we have one shot of opening up, and we want to make sure we do it right to make sure, you know, you can't believe what you read or what you see in the news. It's crazy. I know in Australia, it's, you know, let's not reinvent the wheel. That's the one thing in education. Australia, it's not summertime, it's their fall. I have some alumni that I've been reaching out and talking to, seeing how Australia, which has opened schools up. I have relatives in Greece that actually they brought the seniors back. So let's see what other schools are doing, and let's try to steal the best and make sure we take what works there, make sure it works here. Because, you know, we want to make sure everybody comes back and stays healthy and we're able to do this thing. So
It sounds like you and your team have spent countless hours coming up with this plan. Outstanding.
So yeah, but the governor could say we're all going virtual, so it doesn't matter. So it's, who knows? Who knows? You know.
Dr. Fits, we'd love to hear from you if you have an opinion.
Absolutely. So very similarly, you want to take a look and have more than just one plan. What I have found is that the stakeholder groups, having teachers and nurses and guidance support, social worker support on the team to help us craft out what the return plan will look like. What I find to be very interesting is that a few days ago, superintendents received information about summer school being open, and that we as districts can make the determination if we should in fact have it in person. I immediately told my staff that wasn't going to happen. We were keeping it virtual because I felt that would be more safe. But in addition, it gives us more time to plan out what the return to the Orange Public School District will look like. Again, the thermometers, you know, making sure that the students aren't coming here sick or the staff is coming sick. So we want to make sure that whatever we're putting in place, it has a contingency plan. So I'm creating 3 plans, a regular, you know, return to school plan, and then 2 ancillary plans similar to Tom, because we want to make sure that if we don't return holistically the same way that we're currently, well, before March 17th we're in, you want to make sure that you have a plan where you have asynchronous and synchronous learning, as well as a flip AB schedule type of day where the kids would come in certain grade levels based on social distancing parameters. But I do want to share that one concern that we have fallen into is that some of the parents are essential staff workers, and then what does that do when they have to go to work, right? And so we have to make sure that whatever plan we put in place keeps that in mind, because we have kindergarten kids who may not have a sibling at home to stay with them. And so we have to make sure that whatever we put in place is going to safeguard students' health, but also ensure that parents are able to work, provide a living for their children. In closing, every Wednesday I meet with the self-care team that I put together in the beginning of the pandemic, because we wanted to make sure that through our resources that parents could visit our website and have, you know, self-care supports evident. Every single week we're updating the supports for our families and our students. And so we have to keep that in mind as we return as well. There's a lot of loss of wages, a lot of loss in families. And again, we just want to make sure that we have that in place before we decide to return to the district.
That's incredible. I love that self-care. That's incredible. Now, did you, just a question for you, did you get any pushback? I mean, it sounds like you got really late notification that you can have summer school in person. Did you receive any like criticisms from the community, or did you get emails saying, hey, we wish we were, like, did you receive any concerns, and how did you handle that?
Right. So I'll be very transparent with you. The community here, they really trust, you know, my leadership. And so I'm appreciative of it, because whatever decision I make, I'm very transparent. I write letters. I go on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook Live, and I let them know this is what it is, right? And so there's never a secret as it relates to our planning for, you know, health and safety, but also the academics of our students. So there hasn't been any pushback. You know, interestingly enough, I feel the parents want us to get it right for September. And so they prefer us to keep it virtual for the summer so that our plan for September can roll out with fidelity. And
it sounds like you've established a lot of communication and transparency, and that's it. You can see the direct nexus to why they trust you. Outstanding.
Absolutely.
How about this question for the panel? Any pieces of advice that you'd give maybe a new teacher? I know, Carly, you just finished your first year, but any advice you'd give a new teacher, or maybe even a teacher that may be struggling with the transition into online learning? Any thoughts? Carly, we can start with you. Yeah, and then we'll go.
Yeah, so as a first-year teacher, like I said, it was definitely not what I was expecting my first year, but you take the challenges as they come. 2 main pieces of advice. One is be organized as much as you would inside of a classroom at home. So I know my daily setup was I'd have everything I needed to go, ready to go in the order that I would use it. That way I could focus and be present with my kids. So kind of keeping that same routine, it's on a computer. If you're using slides, have it up in a different tab. If you have a meeting later on, but you have a meeting first with your kids, have that tab up ready to go, or have the link ready to go. That way, when you're in the session with your students, your only focus is on them, and you're present with them and giving them your best every time. My other piece of advice is reach out, use your resources around you, use your colleagues, collaborate. Teaching is a team sport for sure. And I am so grateful for my team at Mama Junction and just my school as a whole and my district as a whole. Don't be afraid to use those resources. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's new for everybody. So really use what you have around you. And I can't say enough how grateful I am for my school and my team, and just, be confident. And we're all learning. Keep going. Keep pushing through.
You can't necessarily go down the hallway and ask a colleague, but it's important that you do reach out, and that's a great piece of advice. Julia.
To kind of echo what Carly said, my biggest piece of advice was also going to be not to invent the wheel, as we said before, is that use your colleagues around you. I've connected with, my colleagues that are SLPs in different schools, private practices, and also my colleagues in my current at Rutgers Day School, so we could work more effectively and work a little bit smarter and hopefully not as hard. I know that sometimes we kind of might get caught up in the perfection of something looking so perfect and the look of it, but really it doesn't always need to be picture perfect as long as it's functional and as long as you're truly meeting that child's goals. That's what it needs to be. And my second kind of piece of advice that I needed maybe someone to say to me a few months ago was that you still need to unplug, because you can only be a great teacher if you also take care of yourself. And when your home becomes now your classroom and your office, it's hard to find that line and to truly clock out at the time that you would clock out. And we all know that teachers never really clock out when they clock out, even if we say we do. But I think now more than ever, when we're virtual and parents now are kind of getting used to you being more available via email, via phone, all those other times, it's important to set those boundaries for yourself so that you can take care of yourself, so you can give as much energy as you can to your students during those hours.
Outstanding advice. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Dr. Baker, you want to add something?
Yes, I'd like to add to what Julia and Carly are saying, is that not only do we have resources within our systems, but there are lots of community resources that really kind of rise to the occasion. What we've had with our hospital outpatient setting is in what we call a child advocacy center. Right, so we have prosecutors on one floor, we have the Division of Youth and Family Workers on another floor, we have family advocates on another floor, and then we have clinicians and mental health and medical people on the first floor where I am. We were fortunate enough to have, because there was the difficulty with parents riding, people coming on buses. A lot of our families take, public transportation to and from sessions, etc. Our partner, the Child Advocacy Center, got a contract with Uber. So they would Uber our families in. We have family advocates who, we said, we are in a hospital, so we get our temperatures taken every day. Each of the family members get their temperatures taken before they come here. We've cordoned off an area, and we have family advocates, because we say only one parent can come with the child so that we can social distance, etc. In order to make all that happen, they had family advocates who would come and sit with the other family members, because parents can't leave a 2-year-old home. They can't leave a baby home. So they had to come at the whole family, although we said only the parent. So we had people who would come and watch the kids, play with the kids, everyone had a mask, etc. And we got lots of donations for tablets. We got 6 tablets on one day for our families who didn't have it. We've had people who looked into Wi-Fi through Optimum so-and-so, that families connected with Wi-Fi. So there's a universe of resources outside of our immediate settings that help us to be able to provide all of these kind of services that families need to make the basic minimum kind of requirement to get the services they need. So there's a wealth of folks and resources out there. You just have to look for them and connect with other people, as you're both saying.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What do you, the question for the panel, what do you think are some, or what resources would you share that may be helpful? I know as a parent, I'm thinking I have 3 little ones, and there was certainly varied approaches, and it's almost like parents or guardians are left to be the teacher. What resources or anything that you would share that would be helpful for parents and guardians during this time?
I want to just weigh in for just a moment, if I can. I think one of the most important pieces that we did in Orange during the pandemic, we had parent informational sessions in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, giving the parents the opportunity to ask critical questions about the academics, but also the self-care components. And so that was a requirement that I put in place for my principals to lead with their leadership teams, whether it be support staff members, whether it be teachers on the team. But again, I wanted to make sure that parents had a clear understanding of the schedules, of the academic requirements, and where to go for additional supports. So we also created a help desk. We also created an email that was answered 24 hours a day for them to ask any questions and get an answer very, very quickly. I just felt that in terms of supports, we put office hours in place to make sure that parents, if they had a question, then they could, again, reach out to the teachers and or the principal. So I think like the teacher said on the panel, the parents were calling teachers at 8, 9 o'clock at night for giving support. The same thing happened in my home. My wife's a first grade teacher in Newark, and she was receiving phone calls at 8, 9 o'clock at night to give supports. And what I have found to be very, which, it made me proud as the superintendent, is that the teachers didn't stop at 3 o'clock. Whatever the parents needed, they gave the supports holistically. So I just want to just intimate that if it wasn't for the teachers and the support staff members, I believe this, the work that we did, particularly in Orange, would have not been as thorough as possible without their support. So I just think the communication is what was most important with the families.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to add? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move over to some of our questions that have been inserted from our attendees. Okay, so first question we have, sorry, I'm switching my screens here. How have you overcome the inequality of access to technology and equipment for students during online education? Some of you addressed this, but maybe we'll ask the question again and we'll hear different perspectives. Any thoughts? Tomy, go ahead.
Corporate America has been very good. AT&T, a lot of the big phone companies had provided hotspots and free internet services. We were lucky that we were basically at a one-to-one with a lot of so any student that needed, we delivered Chromebooks or iPads, whatever they might need. But I think corporate America really came through, and the big companies came through. I just hope they do again come September. I hope it's not like, hey, we helped out back then, now we have to pay for it in the fall. But corporate America was very good. T-Mobile, Verizon, all of them really came through with hotspots and other things to help try to get some equality with communities, because I know every community is different, and that's the first step for them to learn, is make sure everybody had what they needed.
I can concur. I feel that Comcast here in Orange Township, they did a fantastic job ensuring that our families had Wi-Fi internet capability. I meet with them every week, so we have the opportunity to look at, extra supports that are needed throughout the township. In addition, my principal at Lincoln Avenue School, Mr. Frank Iannucci, and his teaching team, they had weekly kiosks at Lincoln Avenue, 6 feet apart, and the families that come inside of the building. We did it through a drive-through window where the students, if they needed additional Chromebooks, or if there was a broken Chromebook, they could go and get them fixed and have a new one returned to them. So for 13 weeks, we did kiosks here in Orange Township. In addition, we're going to have kiosks over the summer because we're going to have summer learning as well virtually. So the team began to finalize those plans today. So again, in terms of equity, I think that we did a great job in terms of getting the Chromebooks to all of our families. We also had to look at families that had 3 to 4 siblings in one household, and then 5 or more, because the qualification for them to get more Chromebooks were predicated on the amount of kids that were in the families. So we didn't want to have to limit families to have supports in Orange Township. We want to make sure that they had everything they needed to be successful to get through the 4th marking period with fidelity.
Wow. Another question from an attendee. Regardless of what happens in September, will virtual teaching become at least a part of the new normal? Any thoughts, panel members? All right, Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker, if you could just unmute. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Part of our when we do forensic evaluations of our families, families typically, and this is even during the school year, they're here for about 3 hours, and that is because and this has nothing to do with the kind of COVID-19 situation, but generally the caseworker for the family where there are allegations of child maltreatment will come in with the non-offending parent and the child. And part of our protocol means that we interview the caseworker to find out what's the latest legal status of the case. Then we have a very structured interview of the parent, the non-offending parent, to see how the child's doing now, how the child is responding post, there's something that we call the aftermath of trauma. So after the child's disclosed, et cetera, and then we interview the child. It's very structured. There are guidelines, national guidelines that we follow, et cetera. And then we provide immediate feedback at the end of all of this. There might be additional division kinds of things to look into. There are immediate recommendations for the child and family. Sometimes our teens go to crisis for evaluation. All kinds of things happen then, and then we send the family home. Now, through telehealth, we interview the worker a day or two before. We interview the parent, part of that evaluation through telehealth, and then we bring the child in. We try not to have the family, meaning the child and the parent, in the building right now for more than an hour, hour and a half, depending on the age of the child. We see kids from 4 up and through their 18th birthday. So we absolutely have found a way to kind of streamline what we do, to do a lot of things differently. And we don't have that family waiting for the division worker to come so that we can start that evaluation. We have a lot of differences. There are a lot of hard to reach families that now we know that telehealth is absolutely an option for families who can't get to us, and we know we need services to provide them with whatever the technology is. We can provide treatment that has, some standard to it and some evidence base to it, and know that it's going to be an effective treatment anyway. We absolutely are not going backwards. We're going to utilize some of the skills and the new technology and the training and the guidelines that we have with us now.
Seems like you pivoted so quickly in that area. That's outstanding. Another question from an attendee. If schools remain virtual, how will students with special needs get the services they require? And if I can call on Julia for that question, if that's okay.
Sure. So if we remain virtual, I think that we would all be following the same format we have been following, where we are following telehealth, telespeech, tele-OT, tele-PT, to provide those services. And I think what might have been a challenge at first, because some of our students might need a higher level of stimulation than we can necessarily provide on a typical Zoom screen. I think at this point, a lot of SLPs, OTs, PTs, related service providers have really trained themselves in figuring out how they can provide that stimulation and get that engagement. So a lot of what we have done over the past few months, and I think we will continue to do, is really utilize parent education as a key component in our service providing. So typically, we don't have quite as much access to parents on in a typical school schedule. So if anything, I think this is helpful to be able to train parents on how to assist their students while they are on the Zoom session or in kind of their natural environment to carry over those skills. So I see us, at least from my kind of role I'm in right now, if we continue with these sessions, we'll continue providing telehealth, but it might look a little bit more different. I know for me, I'm planning my ESY, so we're planning more collaborative approaches, myself and the OT, of how if we know a student has a swing in their backyard or something like that, having the parent get them ready for session on that swing. And the OT's going to coach the parent on what to be doing with their body while I'm feeding in the vocabulary and kind of prompting for different goals in that way. So I think what we'll see is a little bit more collaboration, and I think from a related service provider perspective, a little bit more confidence in the kind of effectiveness of services we can provide. I think at first we might have been apprehensive of that if the quality was not as good, and I think that at this point we can provide the same quality. It just might look a little different than it would in the classroom.
Yeah. All right. Any other panel members want to add, or I'll go to the next question. Next question from an attendee. This one's sent to our superintendents. The question here is, it sounds like the 180-day format will not be in effect if students are attending every other day. So I guess the question is, how will you handle complying with the requirement of the 180 days if you alternate days when students attend? So that's open to either one. Okay, Tommy, you want to start with that one? Great.
Well, we're hoping that the virtual days will count, just like now. So you'll have an actual day. The virtual day will count because there will be instruction. It's not like they're just home being assigned homework. So we're hoping we're going to be setting standards for our teacher. We have a teachers group with the administration so that we can, better prepare for the fall. I commend all the teachers that just kind of got thrown into it. Hey, March 13th, everything's shutting down, and good luck. You're teaching from home. So I think everybody did a great job adjusting on the fly. But I think now come September, where we know we're hopefully going to come back, but if not, we are going to be using virtual. So we need to set standards on attendance. I had some of my students say, hey, summer break, March 13th, and, they never logged on again. We called them, we went to the house, and we're like, you got to log on. And they're like, well, we're virtual now. So they decided to do nothing. So I think you'll see attendance, you'll see, those days counting, because it will be much more structured learning with the virtual classroom this fall.
So you had to track down children that weren't logging on. So you were monitoring who was involved.
Who was involved, everything, yeah.
That's great. Dr. Fitzhugh, do you want to try to answer that question?
I couldn't have answered it any differently. We did the same practices as Tom did. So in essence, if it's a asynchronous day, it should count. But we have to make sure we have the proper amount of seat, the seat time. I know that has, since changed at the high school level. But in addition, again, we have to get the guidance from NGDOE about the next steps as it relates to the 180. But I do think if we have asynchronous learning at home, it should count. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't think we should have any more snow days now that we're professional virtual. It snows. There you go. We're business. Let's go. Keep the calendar.
Wow. Oh, you're getting a thumbs down from Dr. Baker over there.
We like
snow days.
We like snow days.
That's awesome. We have a question for the teachers, and this question is, you were able to transition into a virtual environment with your students, but what happens in September with the new students that don't know the teachers? They're being assigned new teachers. What would happen for those children, or what do you foresee, through the educator lens? How would you see addressing that? And let's start with Carly, and then we can move over to Julia, if that's okay.
Sure. So
okay.
Yeah, sure. That's definitely been a thought, because coming into this in March, you already had your routines and you knew your students and they knew you. So it's definitely going to be a challenge, but I think if you frame it in the way that it's going to be just like a new school year, except now you have to just kind of take some of those tricks and routines that you would do and change it into a virtual mode. So I even know with we have morning meetings, daily morning meetings, where there's a greeting and a share and a little activity. We've already started transitioning some of those greetings, or maybe instead of turning and shaking someone's hand, you can just find somebody on your screen and greet them that way. So that classroom community element of teaching is so important when you're in a classroom, and it's also so important when you're virtual, because they don't have that physical presence in the classroom. So taking those moments, whether it's before you start your lessons or at the end of the day, having kind of like a drop-in or a check-in where students can just share, like, My favorite color is blue, something little where they get to know each other, where they might not have known each other in that way before. And even just, there's a lot of technology and there's a lot of tools out there that you can kind of build in those moments. Like, for example, I know on Zoom, there's an option to create a poll. So in the morning, you could have a poll where it's, what's your favorite season? And students can just very easily click and vote. So something as simple as that, you can say, oh, look, half the class loves summer and the other half loves fall. So something as simple as that really kind of makes those connections between students that they need to get to know you and to get to know each other in order to feel comfortable and secure enough in their learning environment, even though it's not a typical one, where they're ready to learn and they're comfortable enough to kind of grasp everything else that's going on.
Nice. Julia, anything to add for that?
And just to build off of that, I've already had new students that I've started with that started with us while we were in this virtual remote teaching already. So the way we kind of started with them was just as Carly said, treating it like I would treat any new student that would come to the school. I'm not going to jump into our first session starting on their goals. We're going to start our first session building rapport, talking about the things that they like, talking about, depending on the student that I had, their goals and why they do come to speech, so we can build that rapport, telling them a little bit about myself so they know who I am. I'm not just this random person on the other side of a screen. I'm someone who's trying to connect with them and has some similarities with them. So I completely agree with everything Carly said. We can take those small moments that might only take a minute or two of your lesson time, but will really have a big impact on the students' learning that year.
Nice. A question from an attendee, and this is for all the panel members, and this is in terms of preference for your online, your virtual platform. Do you have a preference in which platform that you use, maybe from the lens of a teacher, you know, or in the schools? You know, is there a platform you prefer? Is it Zoom? Is it GoToMeet? Is there, you know, do you have a preference one way or the other? One of the attendees is interested in learning. All right, let's go with Julia, and then we'll go with Carly.
The platform we've used mostly is Teams, and that's just the platform that we had, and I really enjoyed it because I found that compared to Zoom, at least for me, I like to share a lot of social videos, and I found that the audio was a little bit better on the Microsoft Teams. There was less lag, so it was easier to share my screen for us to pause the video, talk about it, and have those discussions on the team format.
Nice. Carly?
I personally have been using Google Meet, and I found that very handy, especially because I use Google Classroom a lot for assignments. It just is a very nice way you can push out assignments. Everything is very student oriented and organized in a way that is familiar to them because I have been using it throughout the year. And Google Meets has constantly been coming out with updates that make it a lot easier to use and more teacher friendly. And one of the great ones is that they just implemented where in the settings, you can turn it on where a link to the Meet is kind of already set up in the classroom. So you don't always have to keep reposting it. Students can just click at the top and join your Meet. So it's teacher friendly and student friendly as well.
Nice. Anyone else have a preference? Yes, Dr. Baker.
Yes, we have, being a hospital system, we have to be careful and have HIPAA compliant connection. So we have to have hospital authorizations, excuse me, to provide therapy to families. So we can't use Zoom. The hospital allowed us to do video, VIDYO, and we use GoToMeetings.com. We can't use Zoom for anything that's confidential, et cetera. So we have, you know, quite a few restrictions to make sure that we have secure connections when we are supposed to have, you know, confidential information and privacy with our families.
Thank you. Okay, before we conclude, we would love to have each of the panelists share in about 30 seconds or less some closing advice that you want to share with our audience today. And let's start with Dr. Baker.
Okay, do what we're doing, you know, talk to each other, as both of our teachers, the newer teachers have said. There are lots of resources, you know, although Rome wasn't built in a day, the buildings that happened in Rome are with us when things that weren't built. So I'm just saying, progress takes time is my point. And the things that last the longest are the things you put more into. So take your time, connect with people, be flexible. We've had many issues with privacy. If we're doing therapy and families are there, we can't ask families. We've had kids who had sessions in bathrooms because that was the only place that they could have privacy with all the other kids in the house. Families who want to hear what's going on. So we have to be flexible, but we have to be, I think, vigilant in what the end goal is, and make sure that we build carefully as we're building, because those are going to be the foundations by which things are going to last, and we're going to make the greatest impact during these difficult times.
Nice, well said. Okay, next we'll go over to Dr. Parlopinites. Tomy.
Just enjoy the moment. Education is great. You're going to love it. Your first year will be the hardest year of your entire life. You'll never work so hard. Your friends will be going out. You'll be doing lesson plans on a Sunday night. It will get easier. I can tell you that. And don't be afraid to ask for advice. Please borrow and take the best from your colleagues. I love going to schools. I might go over to Dr. Fitzhugh's school and see what he has in his school and steal some of his great ideas. So
you can see it all online. He communicates everything on social media. So we know that.
I'll be a follower now, so you'll see me click on soon. But don't be afraid to ask your colleagues. When I was principal, we always had a wow basket. So when teachers were making copies, they would leave their content area in there, so you can take that lesson, because you always want to have at least one wow lesson where the kids are going home talking to the parents, hopefully during dinner, saying, wow, you know what we did in class today. And that's what it's about. But your first year is going to be very difficult. Keep your head up and just keep working, and it gets easier and it'll fly by. So enjoy every minute of it. It's a great profession, and you're changing lives, which is a noble thing. So good luck to everybody and all our future teachers out there on listening today.
Thank you. Very encouraging.
And have a good first summer. Absolutely.
Dr. Fitzhugh, any closing thoughts to share?
I just think that, as my colleagues have intimated, just listen, you learn, and also reflect. This has been I feel like all of us are new superintendents for this new normal. I was a deputy superintendent last year, and it was peaceful. And then I became superintendent, and within 6 months, it was like, and I said, maybe I should have stayed in North. And I'm being honest, because it was like every day you went from a 10-hour day to a 15-hour day, and then you were checking in with everybody to make sure that kids will learn even more than you normally do, because you can't touch everybody every day. So I will say this has been a learning curve for me. I think it's made me a better leader. It's made me a better parent. It's made me a better husband and a better listener. And so in terms of, and this is my big thing on the website about self-care, every single morning when I send a text to the principals, the vice principals, and my executive team, I always say, make sure you take a moment and check in with somebody, because you have to take care of each other first before you can take care of anybody else. So That's my biggest to everybody.
Nice. Thank you. Julia, any closing thoughts?
Really just to echo what everyone has said so far, is just to continue to collaborate, because I think together we're creating a new way to educate, whether we continue to use virtual for a short period of time or extended. In some way, we are changing the way that we educate. So let's continue to collaborate together so we can make it as effective as possible.
Thanks. And Carly?
Mine is kind of what I've been saying, and to build off of everybody else, just be present in whatever you're doing. If you're meeting with your students, be present with them. If you're meeting with your colleagues, be present with them. Listen, also be patient with yourself. This is a learning experience for everybody. Figure out what you can reasonably accomplish in one day. Maximize your resources so you can accomplish the most that you can. But just be patient with yourself. I always tell my students, have a growth mindset. It's progress, not perfection. So be easy on yourself, work hard, and do what you can.
Thank you. Excellent. And thank you. We had a rock star panel here, and we're very thankful for our panelists and our attendees. We know these are challenging times we're experiencing. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thanks again to our alumni team, the College of Education, and thanks again for attending. And as we can all say, go Pirates!
Go Pirates! Go Pirates!
Take care.
Be safe, everyone. Have a great summer.
Have a great summer. Enjoy, everybody.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you all.